Hi everyone, give us half a second. We're just going to go live on Facebook and then begin. Hi and welcome everyone to our weekly CannaTech webinar. I'm Saul Kay, your host, founder of CannaTech, and this week we have with us two international supply chain specialists, Yoram Eshel from Israel. Yoram has been intimately involved in actually moving cannabis in the global supply chain from various different countries that he'll talk about. And we have Arnaud Dumas de Rauly, I hope I said that kind of okay, who's a lovely Frenchman living in the United States, who's intimately involved in the supply chain of hardware from China around the world and specifically into the US. Welcome. How are you guys? Yoram?
Life will never better. We are all okay. We are relatively safe here in Israel. And we're happy to be there, to be here today, this evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Sol.
A pleasure. Arnaud, where are you? Where do we find you?
I'm smack in the middle of Manhattan. It's at the epicenter. I like to know that Blinc is at the epicenter of everything, but hopefully this epicenter will fade away very fast.
And what's the situation there on the ground? I saw some very scary videos. Someone was driving down Fifth Avenue and all the major shops were boarded up. I know of a few of my friends in LA who had their dispensaries rioted, particularly, Cannabis Now. It's been a very, very challenging time. What's it actually feel like there?
Well, it's actually, I had specifically posted some videos of that when I was biking down Fifth Street and it's Fifth Avenue, and it was weird to see everything bundled up like it was a hurricane. But some of these storefronts had been boarded up beforehand when the shutdown happened because of coronavirus, and all the others were just struggling to do it because beginning of last week mostly, there were a lot of violent protests and looting. It's really died down. I think the 8 p.m. curfew has helped a little bit, but there's social equity issues, and it's sad that it has to come down to this. But at least they're back on the front stage right now, and especially during this election moment, it's great for everyone to address them, and it's maybe getting people out of their couch, out of their comfortable spot, and it's going to get things to change.
Yeah, well, I hope it remains that, people aren't getting into an issue with COVID and with, heightening their chance of getting this so far devastating virus. But we're here to talk about the international cannabis supply chain. I guess, Yoram, let's start with you. You've been involved in moving cannabis. We now, talk about Israel as having the ability to export cannabis. We've been waiting a very, very long time for that. But in the meantime, patients here are actually suffering from shortages, and a few of the different companies in Israel imported cannabis. So where have you imported cannabis successfully from to Israel?
So this is correct, Saul. In the last 3 months around, Israel imported roughly, I think, around 3 tons of flowers, of medical cannabis flowers. Personally, I was involved in several shipments from several countries, like Canada, like Portugal, like Latin America, Uruguay, Colombia, even Africa, and some other countries, and not just to Israel, also from South America into Europe. So practically, we moved a lot of stuff, starting from CBD to relatively high THC, 18, 20% and above. This is what we moved, and in quite significant amounts.
And Arnaud, you're in the supply chain for hardware, and one of the things I want to get out of this is, I guess supply chain is supply chain, right? When you're talking about a regulated product, you have to deal with multiple different agencies. You have to deal with multiple different agencies in different countries. You've supplied quality hardware for the cannabis industry, the vape industry, which you manufacture in China. Do you want to just talk about quickly, what it is you do and how is it different from moving physical cannabis?
So I think the regulatory hurdle, as much as people might think it's lower than moving cannabis, it's very complicated. Of course, cannabis is still considered a drug in a lot of countries and in the international shipping community. But on the hardware side, we're faced with a lot of regulation, a lot of historical regulation that has that legislates or that regulates batteries, for instance, that regulates metals, that regulates different types of PCTGs, the ceramics, that regulate all of that. And I think the battle right now between the U.S. and China, which is completely absurd, is definitely not helping this. We testified against the tariffs, for instance, but we were very surprised to see that we were the only cannabis company doing this. All of these tariffs don't only affect vaping hardware, they affect all of the extraction equipment, they affect all of the greenhouse equipment, all the LED lighting, all of that that's imported into the US is being affected, yet we were the only ones testifying. So I think it's really important when you're involved in these supply chain operations to understand what's at stake and to plan for anything that can happen. In January 2020 this year, a new regulation about lithium batteries went into effect. This was put into law last year, but effectively January 3rd, 2020. It was labeling and paperwork requirements for shipping lithium batteries using UN 83.3. No lithium batteries can be shipped without having that certification. Yet all of the Chinese manufacturers that work independently and that are trying to ship products don't know about this. And even less do the importers know about it. And I think that's when it becomes a problem. And when you understand that supply chain is something in and of its own, you can't just say, all right, we'll be purchasing from China and receiving it in Canada or in the US. It just doesn't work that way. There's a whole bunch of regulation, not to mention the safety side of things and the certificates that are needed. Today, a lot of other manufacturers are importing products that are made with brass that contains lead. It's electroplated 2 times to make sure that the leaching of that lead into the cannabinoids doesn't happen very fast. But nevertheless, why don't we use stainless steel? But to be using stainless steel, so SUS 304, it needs to comply with FDA CFR Title 21 standards that need to be known. And I think all of these standards and all of these certificates that are required, not a lot of people know about them. And it really takes a lot of time, effort, and experience to understand what needs to be done to import product. And unfortunately, a lot of producers and manufacturers that are importing right now don't understand that.
If I may add just to it, you said, that cannabis is, I coming from Teva for 14 years. I managed the global logistics for Teva. We moved hundreds of thousands of shipment of narcotics, even Schedule II narcotics. And when it comes, and there are a lot of regulations around that, when it comes to cannabis, I call it narcotics plus. Because of psychology issues, government treat cannabis as much more narcotic than narcotic, although it's even less dangerous than alcohol, right? So the regulatory, as you just said, about equipment, medical device, and so on, when it comes to cannabis, it's like a complete new game and a lot of more layers than just even high standard narcotics.
And so let's talk about that complexity. We've often highlighted there's a huge regulation gap, right? If you're talking about growing cannabis, you're growing it under a certain standard. It seems to be that GAP or CGAP is taking the standard here. In production, we have GMP. With logistics, how does that all work? And how do you plan to know where your supply chain pain points are going to be? Because this is obviously a very high value crop that costs a lot to insure, that costs a lot of time and effort to get into the hands of patients. Go into the supply chain planning and predictability side.
So when it comes to logistics, as you said, production is covered by GMP, cultivation is covered under GAP. When it comes to logistics, there are two major GXP standards that we need to adhere to. One is the GDP, which is the Good Distribution Practices, which is a very strict regulatory requirements in Europe, a little bit different in the US, a little bit different in Israel, but GDP is actually the way where, how do you distribute your products from the end of either the cultivation site or the post-harvest and the production up to the patient, the pharmacy or the dispensary and so on. So this is covered by the GDP, the distribution part, and also the GSP, which is covering the good security practices, which relates to the way you have to protect your supply chain from leaking of products, from theft, from damages of whatever thing. Now, when it comes to GSP, the security part of it, you also have GSP for the site, the fences, the cameras, the controlled access. When you move stuff, security is much more complicated because you have to go through different stations. You have a truck, you have a terminal, you have an airline, you have an airport. So along the supply chain, there are many security. The way we deal with it is actually, first of all, do a very common practice from the pharma area, which is the risk management, risk analysis, to understand what are the risks along the supply chain, where they're coming from, what are the root cause of those risks, and try to mitigate those risks with extra caution, with extra security, with extra protection for temperature, for data loggers. There's a lot of things you have to do. Roughly, when you talk about international supply chain, so first of all, it's planning. Where the goods are coming from, who will carry them, what is the airline, what is the airport. There are 10 ways to move air freight from Canada to Israel, okay? Which one will you choose? Which will be the least risk? Not talking about the corona, but there are no flights, right? So there's a lot of issues about planning. The second thing, which I think is the very challenging point, is the predictability. So supply chain people and logistic people and commercial people really like to predict. If I promise my customer that he will have these 100 tons of flowers, 100 kilos of flowers on the 1st of July, we need to predict what is going to happen. And today, in the current environment, it's a very big challenge. There's a lot of delays of getting licenses, of getting approvals, of flights, of a lot of things along the supply chain. So the challenges are more or less, if you take the challenges of selling, T-shirts from Turkey, it's always so challenging. But it comes to cannabis, when it comes to a flower, right? It's a vegetarian material. Then, of course, the complexity is much more strict and significant.
And I know, yeah, how's that supply chain holding up during COVID?
Well, that's the thing. When Yoram is speaking about planning, and it's you got to do demand planning, and then you got to do the shipping planning, the supply chain planning, and then you got to do delivery planning. So it's all of these obstacles. It essentially looks like a gauntlet that you have to go through to make sure that the products arrive. Now, there are ways to mitigate this. When you talk about the production side, I mean, it's very important to have some risk mitigation done on your production facilities. COVID was a perfect example. We have 4 different subcontractors that we use to manufacture our products. Now, 2 of them we were able to get up right after Chinese New Year. 2 of them took 2 to 3 weeks extra to be up there. But if we had only 1, how would we have managed this? And we wouldn't. That's risk mitigation in and of itself. The second aspect of this is certain materials. Take, for instance, stainless steel, 304 stainless steel. It's about the raw material suppliers. So for each raw material, we have 2 major suppliers and 2 minor suppliers. The minor suppliers are smaller suppliers that in some cases cost a little bit more, but are more flexible. And then you have the 2 major suppliers, which cost maybe a little bit less because they produce high volumes of stainless steel, but they're going to be less flexible when it comes to the amount that you order. Obviously, someone ordering 50,000 tons is going to get precedence over someone who's going to order 5 tons. So it's really this planning and this demand planning is really, really important. And when it comes to the shipping, really the shipping side of things, you have to realize that it's not about putting goods on a plane or on a boat and flying it. You need to have the forwarder who is going to take it from the manufacturing facility to the port. Then you got to clear customs. Then you got to do storage in the port. Then you got to take off or navigate by sea. And then you have all of that flipped over on the receiving side. That's at least 7 to 9 players in every logistical supply chain, which introduces 7 to 9 potential issues, points of issues that need to be thought about. And that's really something that not only takes experience, but that takes contacts and understanding, especially when you're working with foreign entities, in working and understanding those cultural differences.
I would add to the COVID 3 aspects. First one is an unstable service. We had a shipment. 5 times it went from the terminal waiting for the aircraft, and it was canceled in the last minute. The flight was canceled in the last minute. So the unstable air freight service was a nightmare. It's getting better now. More and more airlines are flying now, more and more service. But coming to the winter, we can expect unstable service again. So take a deep breath, and it's not a regular timetable of air freight, because it doesn't work. The second thing, which I was a bit surprised, is the lack of people in the offices. Canada people are working from home, and other agencies, by the way, as well. I'm not talking even about your own stuff. I'm talking about agencies, authorities. Now, if you need a license and people are working from home and there is a curfew or whatever, there you go with a challenge, with delays, with all kinds of issues that you have to go through. So there's predictability. People are at home. You know what I mean. And maybe the last thing, which I was a bit surprised, is that statistically there was a big or significant raise in sales, right? 30%, I believe, of cannabis. Leave aside the recreational side, but also in the medical side, it happened that people, were either want to stay calm or they wanted to get more stuff at home in order not to get a shortage in the market. So above all those complexities, now you have a rise in sales that you have to provide. So Yeah, that's a challenge. You know what I mean? It really requires a lot of understanding and a lot of vast experience in the logistic arena to make sure to mitigate those difficulties in hard times.
Well,
Arnaud, are you seeing supply chain shortages yet in the US?
well, there are from some people who have a single source of supply. So some people buying from one supplier, of course, that supplier is playing catch up now, and it's going to be very hard. That's why diversifying the supply chain is very important. Another aspect that Yoram was speaking about is the routes, and the routes that have been canceled. I mean, maritime freight right now, it's not only the routes that have been canceled, it's the crews that are not allowed to disembark. So those crews are not allowed to disembark the goods. So basically, the maritime routes become huge parking lots where the products just sit. And in the air, it's even worse, because what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of the air freight happens on passenger planes in the cargo holds. I think that's important to point out. And since all of the passenger plates have been canceled for a while, there is no room for cargo. That's why all of the ports of exit are stuffed with products. In Shenzhen, in Hong Kong, I mean, you could take a picture out of the high rises and just see a parking lot of containers. They're just all over the place. I mean, we can see it at a smaller scale, even here in the US. When we order something on Amazon, you're a Prime member, you expect to receive it the next day. I mean, I ordered a pair of shorts this weekend. I'm getting it next week. So it's on a smaller scale, but it just makes you realize what's going on. Now, air freight right now, a lot of the companies have turned their passenger planes into cargo planes to be able to ship the goods.
Cargo flight, yeah.
So cargo flights. So that has opened up a little bit, and that's why the shipping industry has been doing a little bit better in May, and hopefully June will get a lot better. But until those routes are opened, we're not going to get back to 100% normal. And I suspect this is going to take another couple of months if there is no resurgence of coronavirus.
Let's call it the new normal, right? We can call it the new normal. It probably will be there. And by the way, since you're talking about medical cannabis, flowers, and so on, if you have a delay in flight, you still have to keep it with the right temperature, with the right security measures. So it takes measures to keep it, even if you have delays and interruptions along the supply chain. So there you go again with risk management, risk mitigation, and so on.
Are there any advanced tools that you use that use AI and predictability to sort out the supply chain? I know, I mean, I'm a last mile shipper. That's my pharmaceutical business, and it's a little bit different. But, you know, blockchain is designed for this, to help our supply chain and to help recalls and to know every point of contact along the way. What's happening in that side, on the tech side?
So what we are using is actually, since it's medical cannabis, you have to measure the temperature all the time. So you have to attach a data logger to every shipment, every pallet, whatever the case is. So what we're using online data loggers where we can track the shipment by position and by its conditions. So if there is an excursion, we can know about it immediately, or if it's, you know, just laid outside in the sun or not temperature control, whatever. So we are using online data loggers. There are very good online data loggers in the market, which include the AI functionalities. So you can analyze the route, you can analyze, you know, the temperature, you can analyze upon time, the performance, and above all, you know exactly where is your shipment, what are the conditions, and when it moves or when it stays or where it stores. So this is what we're doing in terms of technology.
Arnaud, any tech, any useful companies that do that predictability in supply chain? This is obviously a large issue and highlighted now by COVID and how unprepared people were. But what are some of the best practices that you can use in order to mitigate those risks?
Well, I think this is comparable to an airport. I mean, those of you who are familiar with supply chain will understand when I speak about being the control tower and understanding where it is. I mean, CTM, control tower management, is something widely used to kind of direct and make sure that everything goes the right way in terms of logistics. And there are some companies who have some promising products. But again, I don't believe there's been anyone that has been ready for what happened with COVID, specifically because of those points that are impacted, not only the routes, but also the people on the boats that can't unload, the people that can't board, the people at the customs border agencies that are not there to do the inspection because they have to stay at home. Nothing was built to predict this. So much that a lot of the companies that are known for doing this, that we've spoken to at least in the past couple of months, are not taking on any new clients because they have a whole bunch of existing clients that they have to deal with and mitigate that impact of COVID. So I think the best way, and this comes down to should I use a pen and pencil or should I use a computer, is still the pen and pencil method in understanding what the risks are and laying out those risks beforehand so you can mitigate them. Again, that's the biggest thing you can do. That's how you build supply chain redundancy. That's how you build supply chain resiliency. That's how you get products exported and shipped and imported on time.
And Yoram, redundancy is a little hard in cannabis. If I'm ordering 2 kilos, are you sending 2 shipments of 1 kilo in order to mitigate the risk? How does that all work? Because again, high value crop that has a clock ticking on it in terms of post-harvest to patient, that's now another layer of complexity.
Well, if you ask me as a logistic expert, I will never take 2 kilos and split them. I just increase the risk instead of lowering it. But in general, as I said before, there is a risk mitigation process, and shipping 2 kilos or 200 kilos or 1 ton, there are ways to do it. I prefer to protect it as one lot, and move it through. And remember, you need a license for each shipment. So if you split it, you need 2 licenses. And to deal with licenses, it's again dealing with, we spoke about it before, you have about 4 agencies on each side in the origin country, in the destination country, to deal with about licenses, about clearance, and Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture. So in general, we prefer to protect it as a one lot. Again, it depends on the, in the terms and everything, and to build the logistic plan, how to ship it and how to deliver it safely and with the right quality measures to the destination. This is what usually we will do. And of course, it's a logistic world. I made 10 orders in Alibaba for masks and whatever, and they lost 5 of them. So we also have a very unique, specialized insurance coverage that we were able to work with a special German insurance company, Munich Re, and to provide a special insurance that can cover cannabis shipments from origin to end, door to door, with the temperature risks and so on. And it's specifically built for cannabis. So if something at the end goes wrong, we have a very good insurance coverage as well, very unique one.
Yeah, I'd just like to echo what Yoram was saying, and by something that happened to us no later than last week, and this is the second time it happened since COVID. We're shipping pallets and containers of products from China to the U.S. or to Canada. We decided to for logistical reasons and to figure out how we can maybe divide that package in that shipment in two. First shipment arrived, no problem. Second shipment arrived, it was a mess because we had chosen a different route. So I'm just echoing what Yoram was saying. It's better to respect the integrity of a shipment and let your client know, hey, you're going to get it a week late or 2 weeks late, but you're going to get it in one entire shipment. Unfortunately, sometimes the clients don't want to listen and they want it fast. So you have to put the disclaimers out there. But it's definitely not a good idea to split up shipments and to not respect the integrity of an order.
And let's talk about the time frame. So I guess let's talk pre-COVID. How long does it normally take for a shipment from initiation to receiving it? And I guess they're different across the different supply chains. But in general, let's talk about how long and how much does it cost?
So from initiation, let's say we signed an agreement, the seller and the buyer. So from initiation, you should expect pro-COVID in regular circumstances between 4 to 6 weeks to finalize the licensing process. It works this way. It should start on the imported country. The importer should apply for an import license on the destination country, special documents, special information, whatever the procedure is, they have to apply for import license. Usually it will take about 2 to 3 weeks to get this import license. Once you have it, you send it to the exporting country and you have to obtain an export license in the exporting country. This may take also 2 to 3 weeks until you get it. So 4 to 6 weeks are just for the licensing. You should take advantage of this time to prepare the shipment, the package, the labeling, the instructions, the thermal covers, whatever you have to do. The actual shipment from packing at the site, take it to the airport, ship it, arriving to the destination and clear it, will take about a week. The flight itself may take, I don't know, 24, 48 hours, depending on the, where it comes from and where it goes to. But you have a custom process, you have a clearance process. It takes, you should add 2 days on each side above the flight time. So it's about a week from arrival to clearance, from dispatch to clearance on the other side. Again, more or less depending on which country.
Arnaud, is that the same in the hardware space?
In the hardware space, and what's really important is during the entire conception phase of the hardware, you have to think about what's going to be asked in those countries. So let's look at vaping batteries for Canada, for instance. They need to be UL certified. So when you're creating them, you have to create them in a way that they are UL certified. So if you take that entire space, it can take a year between deciding to make a product and actually being able to ship it. It can even take longer. When you're working with a more commoditized product, like for instance, a cartridge, where you maybe have a client who has their logo and a new mouthpiece on it, this is something that can take from the moment that product is ready all the way to delivery. It should take between 7 to 10 days, the entire shipping process, if of course all your paperwork is in order. During COVID, we've seen that go to 15 days, 3 weeks. We've been able to keep it under roughly 2.5 weeks, but in some cases, we've seen some of our colleagues take 2 months to get products because no one was getting the right information. The regulatory authorities, as much as they have checklists and everything that they need, it kind of depends on who's looking at your product. They might ask you for some information that you've never been asked for 2 years. And all of a sudden it becomes important to that person because there's a change. So they're going to be asking for that. or they might be, for instance, mistaken your products. In the US, a clear example is the nicotine vaping regulation that needs you to have an FDA TP number. So a lot of the times, some of our products get to the US or and are stopped because it says atomizer, and in people's heads, an atomizer is
It's
only
like
for
an atomic
nicotine
bomb.
vaping. Yeah, and it's only for nicotine vaping. So they send it to the FDA. The FDA asks for a TP number. I was like, and we have to get back to them and tell them, guys, this is intended for medical cannabis, or this is intended for adult use cannabis. It will not work with nicotine. And of course, the products get out. And after doing this for such a long time, you get to know the agencies, and the agencies know who you are, so they don't ask those questions. But for someone doing it for the first time, yeah, you might get in a situation where your vaping hardware is stopped by the FDA, which has zero authority over it.
Mm-hmm. And Yoram, coming from the pharmaceutical regulated supply chain, how much do you think they were prepared for COVID? I mean, this isn't the first time that Teva had some international crisis. I don't think of this scale, but how ready is everyone for this type of situation that happened?
First of all, I retired from Teva 2 years ago, so I'm not talking about Teva. Okay. In general, I think that the pharmaceutical industry faced basically two issues. One was about the APIs. Most of the APIs are coming from China, India, those areas. And all of a sudden it became an issue. Usually, pharmaceutical companies doesn't want to have just one source of API, so they maintain two sources. But in many cases, there are two guys in China. So getting the APIs into production was really a challenge. This is one thing. The second thing, I think it was the issue of air freight. A lot of the pharmaceutical, because of the rise in the consumption and the demand, was there, and a lot of air freight should be done. I know that some companies really chartered full aircraft to move their stuff, which means a lot of cost, of course. Even the regular air freight was 3 times or 5 times as much. So they faced a lot of cost to bring products to the market and the APIs. But those who had products in the market, I think they are blooming. I mean, you know, people feel all of a sudden that the pharmaceutical companies are the good guys, right? They provide good stuff to the patients. But in terms of supply chain and production, these were, I believe, the main challenges, the cost and the APIs.
And so with cost, what, you know, if I'm planning to release a product and I've got a product here that fits both your supply chains, I'm releasing a vape with a specified cannabinoid profile. What would the cost be per gram of moving the cannabis? And then what are the costs per unit for moving the hardware? And how do you break down those costs for people who don't know the intricacies of the industry? Yoram, start with the cannabis, I guess.
Okay, so again, cost, you know, it's like a general question, you get a general answer, right? What is the cost? Of course, it depends where from to where, you know, between continents, within Europe, things like that. Second, it depends on the Incoterms, whether you are costing, you know, from the site up to the final destination, or just the air freight and so on. And it depends. And by the way, trucking of cannabis in a temperature controlled truck, secured truck, it's a very costly thing. Sometimes even like air freight, just that you know. But roughly, you know, as a general estimation, I made a calculation, and as a general destination between, let's say, North America, Europe, Israel, more or less these areas, the cost will be around, and I'm saying around, don't get me and don't kill me for that, but should be around 4 to 4.5 cents per gram, maybe 5 cents dollar per gram. This is more or less where you can cover the logistic cost. And again, I'm talking major destinations. So if it's, I don't know, somewhere downtown, whatever city in Latin America, it will be different. But roughly in North America, Europe, Israel, more or less, this will be the cost.
So the cost on the vaping side is fairly simple, and this is compiling data over 10 years. So we're fairly certain of the cost. When you want to airship any kind of vaping product, you're looking at anywhere between 10 to 12% of the cost of the product. And when you want to sea ship it or use maritime routes, you're looking at about 5% of the cost of shipping. So that's something that we always ask our clients.
The price of the product, from the product cost or from the product price?
From the product cost.
Wow, that's a bit, it's a bit high.
It is because you have high volume and high weight products. So there's a lot of weight restrictions in shipping. Just going back to what we were saying earlier, you need to know what the regulations are. Yeah. And it's very complicated because you have certain regulations that are in one city and in one country, sorry,
in one state,
and not in others. So it's really, really hard to predict this, but roughly that is the cost of shipping for vaping products. And of course, the timing is different. If you want to airship, you're looking at maybe anywhere between 7 to 15 days maximum from a factory all the way to distribution. And if you want to sea ship, you're looking at a minimum of 45 days. Anyone that tells you it can be done in 15 days or 20 days coming from China, no, it's not
China,
possible.
not from China, yeah.
It is not possible. So those are the estimations.
Awesome. I'm going to jump to a couple of the questions that were asked. There, one that caught my eye is, are cannabis shipments target for theft, robbery? And this would go into hardware as well. There must be a lot of leakage from the supply chain into the black market, or not even leakage, but actual black market. You know, how do you mitigate that? I guess it's a high value crop like anything, and you have insurance. That's one way. But are the facilities set up for this along the supply chain to mitigate those risks?
So the answer is yes. First of all, I just want to mention insurance is the last resource. Okay. So first of all, you have to take a lot of measures to protect your product. And just if it doesn't really work, then you have insurance. It's not the other way around. But what you do is actually you secure each point along the logistic chain and mainly solve the touch points when you transfer from one vehicle to the other. These are the points where you may have more issues, right? These are the weak points. But in general, you will protect it. The truck will be sealed with armed guards around it, will be delivered to a very safe area within the airport, a cage locked with access control. Nobody can get into it. Then you load it on the aircraft with a special procedure. There is a special procedure like diamonds and valuables or whatever. Then you offload it in a special procedure. Then you store it again in a locked room. So all those points along the way are really requires special measures. By the way, you even pay for it, but all in all, you protect the supply chain. And frankly, personally, I believe that as much as we will be able to prove the regulators that we can control the supply chain, we are taking all measures to secure it and to prevent leakage. I believe that they will ease down the requirements, if you understand what I'm saying. It's for us as an industry and the logistic expert to prove that we can protect the supply chain in a high level with high technology and with high level of procedures. And, you know, touch wood, up until now, we never had any leakage or any theft or any damage along the way. I'm not saying it cannot happen, but we're taking a lot of measures to protect that. And, you know, I'm coming from a country where we understand something about security, right? So this is where we are.
And same for vape tech, or is it a little bit simpler and you know follows better practices with more regulation? Because I guess where there is more regulation, it makes your jobs easier.
It's a lot easier for us. Let's just say we don't have to adapt to regulations that change every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But on the theft side, most of the issues, I think we've seen 3 issues over the past 2 years where there was theft involved. That mostly happened on the import side from the last mile, and it's not like hijacking diamonds or anything. It's a shipment that contains 2 pallets of 20 boxes each. One box was, you can see there's like a little piece of a little slit. Someone slid it with a cutter and took something out of it. But that's all. There hasn't been any vandalism, at least. And then there are other issues when that last mile is handled by commercial ground shipping companies like UPS or DHL. And especially during this COVID period, like we spoke about earlier, about the issue with that box that was open and all wet, where there's some carelessness. But again, insurance is there to cover that, and that insurance can be doubled, because you can have the importer's insurance, and you can also have the shipping insurance, and you can also have the manufacturer's insurance that covers any kind of loss like that. So if you plan it well, there's always ways around it. Of course, if you're shipping 10 pieces of something in a tiny box and that box goes bad, then it's your whole shipment. But that never happens to what we ship.
So in product, Yoram, that is sensitive. There's both a long time frame. You've tested your cannabis, you know, after it's come out of the farm, and now it's going to move through that supply chain. You probably have to test it on the other side as well. How risky is that in terms of you've got an agricultural product that is alive and changing? Yeah.
Well, first of all, you can argue whether it's an agricultural live product, right? Because most of the bulk flowers are moving packed and dry. So they're not exactly, you know, live, they're live, but they're already packed, dried with the vacuum and whatever. So just that we take it correctly. Usually what we see is that some tests are done on the cultivation site, post-harvest, laboratory tests, irradiation, all those areas where you have to test it at the origin. And then some tests will be done at the destination according to their own GMP regulation. In Israel, for instance, the IMC GMP requires several tests to be done by the manufacturer. So I cannot say it's a split. There are some tests done at the origin, and some tests has to be done in the destination, in the factory. And also the irradiation is an issue. Some countries it's a requirement, some countries it's not, but also it can be done at the origin, but it also can be done at the destination. My own opinion is, when you are sorting a deal with a provider, make sure it's very clear who is doing what and what are the terms. Because if you don't pass the laboratory test, then what? Just that you know, you cannot return the shipment back, okay? So be careful to define, and this is my suggestion to both sides, the seller and the buyer, to define very strictly and very cautiously which tests, what will be written on the certificate of analysis, who is doing what, and what will happen if it doesn't pass. So it's part of the whole thing, because if you cannot, at the end of the day, market it or you know, send it to the market, then it's an issue. So you have to take care of that.
Same with your products, Arnaud?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely this this understanding of what are the requirements and the products that and the testing that is needed and required by both sides is really the most important. And again, that you will never know just by looking online or by searching online. It's really a job in and of itself to go figure out what needs to be done, because nothing is worse than having a shipment arrive and you get called upon and say, guys, do you have this piece of paper? Do you have this form filled out? Do you have that? Because then it's kind of unravels a whole bunch of other issues. And when you're talking about products that have best buy dates or expiration dates on them, that's loss for your client, hence loss for you as a producer.
Fully agree.
I think that basically was what I wanted to cover in terms of time frame, cost, risk analysis, mitigation strategies. Do you have any tips or case scenarios that you've used in the past that have helped you, navigate? I mean, COVID is, let's leave that aside because I don't think we were prepared for that. But what have you done in the past that helps you, specifically in those supply chain holes that can come up?
If I may, I think that the real key is the deep understanding of the regulation. What you can or you cannot do, right? I saw some question. Can you bring non-GMP products into Germany? Can you do it on as a trial shipment? I mean, as a clinical trial, or can you bring samples for laboratory tests? Can you export it or can you import it? I think that this is the key. Leave aside, the flowers and the finished goods. There's a lot of things, in Colombia, you can ship products, but you cannot ship flowers, or the other way around. So really, really, you have to study and to really understand what are the regulations. When you understand that, go to the next stage and try to understand what are the licenses, what are the documents, exactly as you said, what are the requirements around it. Don't even start before you have a very clear view about the regulations and about the requirements, the licensing requirements around it. That's my tip.
Yeah, I think that's a very nice tip, is understand the regulations around it. Now, adding from a business perspective, I think understanding the culture of where you're getting your product from is immensely important. I'll give you a clear example. We spoke about this before while we were preparing the call. We were able to open our facilities, and I'm sorry, I'm insisting, this was during COVID, right after Chinese New Year, through our relationships with the Chinese government by pledging to allocate 2 production lines specifically for making masks for the local population. This was back in January, end of January. We were able to open those facilities and start production straight away. That was only made possible because we had spent the 10 past years going back and forth, sponsoring the local rugby team, speaking with stakeholders, helping them identify how customs in China could regulate the import or export of nicotine and nicotine vaping in our past lives. It's time spent with the regulators, with their families, going out together, really spending that time and understanding those cultural differences is really what's most important. And I think one of the main cultural differences, and we work obviously a lot with China, is speaking up front. I mean, when every time I go there, I meet new people. I'm like, hey, you didn't look as fat on your picture. They don't mean it bad. They don't mean it badly. That's the thing. And I see so many people get offended by that, but no, they're very pragmatic. For them, being fat, quote unquote fat, is sign of health and wellness. So again, that's like a clear mistake that people don't understand, specific to Chinese culture. I just wanted to end on a funny note like that, but really understanding the culture is very important to building those relationships and being able to, if I could put this in politically correct way, unfuck situations when they happen.
You sit on the ISO, you chair the ISO standards for the vape industry. Tell us a little bit about that and what sort of similar organizations might exist for the supply chain that attendees here could get more information or get involved in writing the standards, in writing and making the movement of hardware and software, in this case, easier over time?
Well, there are ISO standards involved. I don't have off the top of my head the names of those standards or the numbers involved in shipping. There's also a lot of other standards that have a portion of them involved in shipping. That's why it's kind of hard to merge all of that. But there are 3 or 4 associations across the world that try to wrangle around all of shipping and understand how it can happen. There's even specific associations about shipping flowers, for instance. I'm not talking about cannabis, but shipping, how to better ship flowers, and they develop best practices for that. Again, this is all about understanding and doing your research, going out there and being able to understand what's going on. So I'm pretty sure, I'm actually going to do it right now. I'm typing on Google Supply Chain Association. And you're probably going to get a few, there you go, ASCM, Supply Chain Professionals, Supply Chain Management. You see a lot of them. And I encourage everyone to work with these associations, not only because you'll get to understand and be exposed to a lot of information that potentially you won't be able to find yourself, but also you'll understand the complexity of this, and never again talk to the person who's shipping your product and say, why is my product not here in 1 minute?
So we're going to open up a supply chain conversation on our interactive app that we use, Hoover. I'll invite you guys afterwards to maybe co-host that so that everyone can get some deeper knowledge around supply chain and logistics. I want to take this opportunity to thank you for joining us from Israel and New York. These have been incredibly challenging times. I've enjoyed this new mode of interaction. I've joined at least one webinar every single day across everything from psychedelics to now supply chain. And it's definitely a new way of interacting. And we're trying to bring that so that you can take it post webinar and actually interact with the people and provide solutions. And we'll make your names and email addresses available to anyone who watches this, so you can be in touch with them if they need logistics.
Thank you very much, Sol. Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you, Arnaud. It was really a pleasure to meet you and to hear you. And we are here if anybody has questions or need advice, always here.
Yep. Thank you very much for organizing this. And I'm pretty sure we'll be talking very soon, Yoram. And so thank you very much, guys. And again, thank you for everyone for listening to us go on for an hour.
and stay safe and healthy, right?
Yep.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.